Hi there, Earth Nation. This is Amanda with the Activated Earth. Welcome to Summit 2022, the what, how, when of the quantum. And I am here with David Chelf, and I'm going to introduce you now, David. So, David holds degrees in physics from UCLA and UC Berkeley and has taught math and physics from the middle school to the college level. David's life transformation began in high school in Tampa, Florida, where, as an out of shape and overweight teen, he decided to join the wrestling team. The resulting changes in David's health created an additional epiphany for him, and he realized that the quality of his food was vitally important as well. So he began to grow his own food. These two unique things about David, his science background and his food growing background, took on a whole new life. So this background and passion for healthy spiritual food that comes from working in harmony with nature, he became an inventor. And his combination of physics with agriculture has helped him design amazingly efficient greenhouses that utilize appropriate sunlight and airflow options for food plants year round. And you may be wondering, what does this have to do with this quantum summit? Because you're very much a science guy, which, as you know, I totally love that. And we've had some amazing conversations. But what this group of people doesn't know is your spiritual story. So I left that out of the bio so you could surprise everybody with it.
Cool.
So I would love it if you would begin by sharing, your pivotal moment where you realized that there was something else going on here that needed some exploration.
Yeah. So amazing. Yeah. And long before I even knew what the word physics was, had any concept of physics other than, just being in the world. I was about 7 years old and very curious. In fact, curiosity killed the cat was one of the things I heard all the time. In my case, I had a lot of lives, so that all worked out. And one of the things I was curious about was what I was like before I was born. So one day I was standing up against one of my favorite trees. It was a climbing tree, but it was also very, connecting for me. Had very soft brown bark. Leaves were fuzzy and sticky when you rubbed them. And I was up against this tree, feeling the leaves and trying to understand what I was before I was born. Who I was, what I was before I was born. I kept thinking about, well, I know what babies look like. Well, before babies, what was I? I had no idea, the details. And I couldn't think of anything. And so I started focusing on what did my face look like? I tried to picture a face before I was born. And I probably spent 5 minutes thinking about that. Seemed like forever, right? When you're a kid, 5 minutes is forever. And so after not being able to see what I looked like before I was born, kind of like my mind wandered, but it felt like I was guided, okay? I started thinking about the fact that I could not think of what my parents were thinking. I wasn't able to think their thoughts. They weren't able to think my thoughts, and same with my brother and sister. And then this image started coming into my mind of everybody being individuals, all the people around the world as individuals. And as I was thinking of that, the notion that was entirely contrived, I guess the word that I had in my mind as a 7-year-old was how odd that was, that we were individuals. And so the language that I would use now is that I just felt like that was contrived. It was an illusion. I don't know that I had those words at the time, but that's what I was thinking. That's what I was feeling. And then as I was in my head with that thought that individualism is contrived and illusion, it's just odd, my entire being was overcome with the understanding that everything was totally, absolutely connected. I mean, every single part of me, not just my brain, okay, not just my thoughts, but my entire being was just overcome with the connectedness of everything. And that was probably the most powerful moment in my life. And as a 7-year-old kid, growing up in a very fundamentalist community with very individualistic notions about everybody's responsibility for every single thing they do and every single thing they think, relaying that idea that everything, all this individuality is contrived, is an illusion, and that everything is totally connected. I didn't feel like that would go over very well.
Well,
So
what did you do with that as you grew older? How did you absorb that into yourself?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I totally absorbed it into myself. It was totally in my being that everything was connected, and that this individuality was our experience in this world. I wasn't denying the individuality. I was just understanding it as this is our experience in this physical world. And that even in this physical world, though, everything is totally connected. You can't get around that part, okay? So I lived my entire life without disclosing that, just living it. In other words, just being it and not verbalizing it. At least not verbalizing it as that story.
So if you could maybe explain, if you even are able to, since you've lived your whole life being this, what do you think so many other people are doing, and how are they being that's different? You know, when we don't understand or accept that there's this oneness, what are the differences?
Yeah. Well, first of all, in my experience, we're denying our own worthiness. We're denying our intrinsic worthiness. We're denying others' intrinsic worthiness as all being connected to the one. And in addition to that, we're denying the abundance of everything. We're living in scarcity because our brain, our ego, whatever it is, has taught us to be afraid of that which there is nothing to be afraid of. It's like me being on a high wire. You know, I have a natural fear of heights, and I can see the safety net below me, and I still have this fear. And even though I feel the fear, there's nothing to be afraid of. And I have learned to embrace that. I've learned to embrace that because I know everything is connected and we're all connected to the one, and we've got an ultimate safety net all the time. We do.
So what I'm hearing is, in your description, is it's a difference in belief systems and how those belief systems affect maybe how you feel about yourself, and then what kinds of things come into your environment based on those belief systems. Is that correct?
Yeah. It's a way to see the universe. It's a way to see God. It's a way to see everything that is connected in an inclusive way, not exclusive, but inclusive way. Okay. So we can see things as inclusive or exclusive, and I see everything as inclusive.
I'd like to just backtrack for a second, because I feel like you inadvertently, in your 7-year-old existence, applied one of the things that quantum physicists talk about being an amazing way to be, which is applying beginner's mind, right? Mm-hmm. So you went totally outside the box that we generally have, that there's this separation. It's really easy, especially when we're young, to see and feel the separation. And I was wondering if you could tell everybody here, just tell us all about beginner's mind and how it has worked for you as you continue to live your life.
Yeah, that's a great question. Beginner's mind is just not being pre-programmed. That's pretty much what it is. So if you either are not pre-programmed or you just don't accept your pre-programming, then you're going to be more available to the as that is, the reality of things. And that's true in science and in physics and life and spirituality. I mean, it covers everything. The more you think you know, the more limited you probably are in terms of learning what you get to learn. And so yeah, the beginner's mind is a gem. It's a real beautiful thing. It allows for awareness. It allows for awareness to penetrate. It allows for you to see things as they are.
Oh, wow. So many questions. Okay. So what does that mean? It allows you to see things as they are.
So yellow is my favorite color.
I see you wearing yellow today.
Yes, exactly. Intentionally. And while I see yellow in a very passionate way, I realize that not everybody necessarily sees yellow the same way. And so in my mind, I just know that this color that I'm wearing gives me a connectedness and energy that I really, really appreciate. And everybody will see it a little differently. And the thing about the beginner's mind is that if I have a chance to listen or share in someone else's experience, I am not filtering it. I'm not putting it in my own filter. I am just totally being in what their experience is. In other words, just connecting to them directly without interpreting it in mine. And that's, human interaction, but the same is true with human physics, physical world, universe, human God interaction. In other words, if you don't necessarily put your definitions, your filter on what it is you're hearing from the universe or another person, then you just can you can just take it in as it is. And that creates an awareness that is much more, I would say, real or much more true than having everything being interpreted by your standards, your judgment, your ego.
Okay. So how would you discern between real and true? Is there a difference?
That's a great question. So real, if I would say, if I want to use my language,
Yeah.
Real is something, as a scientist, we tend to be able to say we can measure, and we can repeatedly measure, even if there's some uncertainty about it, like in quantum mechanics, right?
Mm-hmm.
That we can all agree upon that we observe this. It's a common observation. It's a common understanding. Truth, to me, is a little bit beyond that. The metaphor that I typically use is, the question is, is the glass half full or half empty? Which is the old psychological assessment of, are you an optimist or are you a pessimist? And if you just stick with that limiting question, you're going to get a limited answer typically. And if you ask a more open-ended question, you get to the point where, like what's in the glass, you get to the point of understanding or awareness that there's water and air in the glass. Once you see that, once you have that awareness, then you have the factual understanding that the glass is full, water and air. But the truth is, beyond that, the glass is open. So the glass is actually overflowing. The air in the glass actually overflows into the air in the entire world, into the space of the entire universe. And that's the truth. So I guess what I'm saying is reality tends to be things that we can focus on and identify and all agree upon through repeated observation, because we're typically limited to our five senses and how we communicate. But truth is essentially greater than that.
So reality, then, what if we decide that we'd like reality to be different? Is it possible to shift reality?
Well, we certainly can fill our glass with water, or we can fill our glass with air by drinking the rest of the water. Yes, we can make those practical shifts. So, but the other kind of shift is where you're dissociated from reality. In other words, I drink all the water, fill the glass with air, and then say to myself, the glass is full of water, when I've filled it with air. And all my point is, in that is, that's something that's that is not a reality that we'd necessarily all agree upon, because liquid water, turns out to be of a different density, a different mass, and so on, different properties than air with humidity in it, which has, water vapor. Anyway, I guess what I'm saying is reality tends to be, at least as a scientist, tends to be something that we can agree upon through observation and definitions and observation.
Right. So how do you, let me see how I'm going to ask this question. So, here this space that we live in, what we can see, we can see it, we can smell it, we can taste it, we can touch it. So these are all things that, that can be measured, that then create this reality. If we are collectively creating this reality, could we collectively create something different?
The short answer is yes. I will say yes, but the but is there gets to be intention. Without intention, the yes is just whatever. So yeah, that brings up concepts like entanglement, which is a consciousness. I see it as a consciousness that permeates the entire universe. And actually, there's a couple aspects of entanglement that I would connect directly to spirituality. But entanglement, to me, is the ability to shift the thoughts or whatever in your being, and have that shift be reflected throughout the universe. And it's not just the physical reality of things that we see with light, gravity. There's like 5 basic forces that we talk about in physics. Basically light, gravity, and nuclear forces. And what I'm getting at is that in what I call our free will, our ability to manifest, our own thoughts, our own ways of being, we shift all those things. We shift those energies through this consciousness.
Okay, so just to make sure that I'm clear, what you're saying is through I guess injecting a certain intention and energy of intention into our reality. Can't see my fingers.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
um, then this is, you're referring to this as entanglement. So this is something that could be utilized to, if enough of us did it, to change some of the energies that are in the reality that we live in. And I know you've already spoken about, a lot of us are coming at things from fear or lack. And how much energy do you think it would take for us to shift us into a reality where that the truth of abundance, as you're calling it, in the glass with the water and the air in it, the truth that abundance, I mean, that's the truth. There's abundance, there's constant flow.
Mhm.
How hard would that be to shift our planet?
Yeah, it's a great question.
Do you think anybody knows the answer to that?
Yeah, well, that's my
I want to hear what you have to say.
Okay, so I'm not going to talk from a sense of knowingness like a scientist is talking from a sense of knowingness. I'm going to talk from a knowingness that's more like an alignment of my entire being.
Okay.
And that is to say that in this literally for me as a 7-year-old, in this awareness that individuality is our experience in this world, and that everything is totally connected. I treat everyone as if they are a reflection of me. Now, I'm not I'm not perfect at that. So I get to see the contrast. Part of that contrast is when I'm treating people as true reflections of me and owning my worthiness and acknowledging their worthiness. It's something that's much easier for them to then accept. And it doesn't take much it doesn't take really anything other than just being. In other words, just my acknowledgement of other people's value helps other people embrace their value. That's just the way it works.
Right.
And, the irony behind that is when you deny someone else's intrinsic worthiness, their value, then you distance yourself from your own. In other words, it's really reciprocity, as they say in physics. The reception and the transmission are on the same order. And what I'm getting at is that there are physical ways to represent, say, abundance. And then there's also just ways of being that are abundant. In other words, you can be in a state of openness where the options are so infinite, you can't even think of scarcity. Right?
That sounds like a great place to be.
It is a great place to be. And in that what I'm saying is, in that being, you are projecting abundance. And that abundance gets absorbed in some way. Not everybody has the same way of interpreting everything, but what I'm saying is that being is like consciousness. It permeates the entire universe instantly.
Okay. I think there's a really important point that you touched on in here that I'd like everybody to really understand. So I'd love to go back to this idea of the reciprocity as it is in the world of physics, the receiving and I think it was the transference and then the receiving. And if we are all one, as you transfer, you receive, and as you receive, you transfer. And that gets to be a process by which we can really change things here. And if you could just either clarify for me that I have that concept down or expand on it a little bit more, I think that's really important for everybody.
Yeah. So I'm going to use a metaphor. It takes a certain amount of light for us to be able to read a book, right? Some of us have better eyes than others and it requires less light, right? But a small amount of light allows us to read a book because there's energy in the form of light that hits the pages of the books and, you know, reflects backwards, and or actually emanates in all directions, and we can see the book from various angles. And the point is that that's a notion of energy as information. Okay, I'm gonna distinguish these levels of states of energy and consciousness. So the amount of light that you're getting may depend on the amount of sunlight that's available, moonlight, starlight, whatever, or if you're, you know, overhead lights, you know, your electric lights are turned on. It takes a certain amount of energy just to flip the switch, right? And then the lights are on and you can read your book. My plant behind me may need actually even more energy than that to be growing and healthy. So it may require a bigger light, which is more like just plain old energy work, you know, like making things happen, like, you know, doing things, where this plant can turn light into carbohydrates and take up water and so on, do all of its life processes. And then there's a type of energy, or excuse me, there's a type of information that doesn't even require energy. Okay. And that is what I'm calling consciousness. That's what I'm referring back to entanglement, where information travels throughout the universe without even being energy, without being things that we normally think of as tangible. We normally think of as, you know, like light or like an electron or like, you know, touch. And so with the concept of reciprocity in the physical world, you have reciprocity in terms of, say, like two electrical antennas, like a TV station or radio station transmitting, you know, electric waves, electromagnetic waves, radio waves, and another antenna on your boombox, you know, detecting that signal. But the processes are reversible. You could take that boombox and put power into that boombox's antenna, and it could be received by the radio station. And so that's the literal physics interpretation of reciprocity, that those two antennas can communicate to each other just as well. This one is a receiver or a transmitter. This one is a receiver or transmitter. If you have the same energy flowing out of this one, it'll be received the same way. In other words, they're reciprocal. And they can both transmit and receive simultaneously all the time. In other words, it's not that they're just, you know, one may be smaller than the other, but they are, as a communication system, just as effective in either direction. And they can be doing both receiving and transmitting all the time. So that's the physical model of it. With respect to consciousness, it's like everything is totally entangled. Everything is totally connected. So I cannot have a thought without creating an influence out there in the universe that is receivable by anything, by everything. It will always be receivable, and I will always be receivable of, you know, every other thing, every other consciousness, every other thing going on in the world. Now, I may not interpret it the same way as everybody else, but it'll be available to me. I can't tell you how many times I have had some kind of like epiphany, and within a matter of a month, I see that in the world because it was projected out there, whether it was a trademark name or a way to look at male-female relationships or whatever that have come into my mind and just been reflected back at me within a short time.
Can you give us an example? Do you have a specific example?
Oh yes, several. So in 2003, I was thinking of what would be the next thing beyond organic. And I was thinking of heirlooms and I was thinking of organics. Then the word wild came to mind, like wild fruits and vegetables. And so I had a word that stuck, or a phrase that stuck in my mind as a little kid from mishearing Grumpy and Snow White talking about wicked wiles, women, that referring to Snow White's wicked wiles. And I didn't know what wiles were. So I heard it as wicked wilds. So anyway, I thought wicked wild. So that's a great name for, a line of wild and heirloom produce. And then as soon as I thought of wicked wilds, the name Untamed Taste came into my mind. So as soon as these two names came into my mind, I'm thinking the universe is spreading this around. Okay.
Yeah.
And so I went and trademarked those two right away. And about 2 months later, I got a call from a marketer asking me to sell the name Untamed Taste to her because she had gone to the trouble of doing a marketing survey for this line of fanciful ice creams that her client was going to put out. And Untamed Taste came back with by far the highest recognition. Well, I didn't bother for doing a marketing survey. I just went ahead and put in the trademark application. She saw that I had the application and wanted to buy it from me right away. And I refused because I really wanted that name. But I guess what I'm saying is that's an example of one time when that's happened. There's many more examples that are just as ironic or funny, where the universe it's just in and out, in and out. So you get to choose what you're going to do with that.
Yeah. I'm really feeling everything that you're describing. I feel like it so makes sense, especially this notion of consciousness, completely available to all of us, and whatever we put in it is available to all of us.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that speaks of connection, which is key to, my spiritual practice and my notion of what it means to be a spiritual person. And I would love to hear you expand around how you have applied connection or your spirituality in combination with your scientific endeavors so that everybody can discover just how wonderful it can be when you keep these things together.
Yeah, that's a great question too. So speaking of being pre-programmed and so on, there was so many times that I recognized after the fact that I was so pre-programmed, focusing on raising the carbon dioxide levels for growing plants. I came up with a method of keeping a greenhouse cool without ventilating so that I could raise the carbon dioxide levels like 4 or 5 times what they are normally. And only to learn that I didn't have enough airflow to allow the plants to fully exchange not only carbon dioxide with the leaves, but also water vapor out of the leaves, which brings new water with minerals to the leaves. So I got a chance to learn how, in my preconceived notion, I was overlooking information that was right in front of my face, okay, for about 4 years that said airflow gives the leaf more carbon dioxide and more minerals by allowing more water to evaporate. In other words, here's something that I was overlooking and I was focusing on just the silver bullet. And So that was like one of my first aha moments, that by being so prejudging, if you will.
Okay.
And so that led to the discovery that I had about airflow, which was how to ventilate and pressurize and support a structure with just air pressure that was a combination of nature and manpower, mechanics. And so I was trying to take this concept of an enclosed greenhouse that was essentially not ventilated, and trying to make it economical by turning it into a big pressurized air bubble. And in doing so, I was really limited. I was limiting myself to thinking of creating enough pressure inside this bubble, like a lot of air supported structures, where you're fighting the wind outside. Okay. And so in fighting the wind outside, you need to have enough internal pressure to fight that wind, because the wind itself has force. And what I'm saying is that coming from that perspective, all I was doing is trying to think of, well, how do I get that force, that energy in there to keep that structure up? And once I opened my mind a little bit to, well, where does that energy come from? And allowing myself to think of, well, the wind itself that's pushing on the structure has its own energy and its own pressure. And if all I do is allow that force of the wind to be directed into the structure, into, say, a greenhouse, then by capturing the pressure of that wind and running that wind through fans, and I can add any more pressure I want to it, I now have a greenhouse, a structure that uses the energy of the wind, the pressure of the wind, and the fans together, so that as the wind speed picks up, the pressure inside the structure automatically picks up, because that pressure is directed inside the structure. And what I'm saying by that is that allowing my mind to not just resist the forces of nature, but embrace the forces of nature and work with it, I was able to see that nature, with the mechanical energy of the fans, could be so much more efficient and effective than just the mechanical alone. In other words, all I had to do was open my mind just up a little bit to accept the value of the thing that I was fighting. I was trying to come up with a means to fight the wind. And that was like the totally wrong perspective, because it limited my thought. It limited my ability to be creative. And when I embrace the wind as energy and not just something I have to fight to, hold the structure up against it, not to stand up against the wind, but actually use the wind as a means to, so to speak, inflate, to pressurize, then I wasn't fighting it anymore.
So would you say that it's as easy as connecting with a solution, no matter where it may come from, to receive a bigger picture answer? Yeah.
So it really is, it's more, so I would say, yes, that's one way to look at it. The other way to look at it is releasing all the resistance. So I had a lot of resistance to seeing the wind as useful.
Okay.
I had a lot of attachment to seeing the wind as something I had to stop. In other words, if I'm going to be creating this big bubble to protect my plants from extreme cold or whatever, and to raise the carbon dioxide levels in it, if I'm pressurizing it, I'm seeing the wind as the enemy.
I would love to use this metaphor, um, because, wind is definitely my least favorite of the elements. But it's necessary. It's here for a reason,
Mhm.
and some places have more of it than others. And I would love to use this metaphor for how you could offer to all of the human people that are out here listening right now, how they could let go of their own resistance around themselves.
Yeah. Um, well, first of all, that's just don't give your ego so much credit. That's my first little tidbit. Uh, is um, not being so attached to your value as as an individual, but your value as an individual interconnected with everything else.
Beautiful.
Here's what I've learned from physics. And there's a paradox in physics, and there's a paradox in the universe and spirituality, I see. And that is the fact that everything is totally interconnected, and yet we're having an individual experience. We have this free will within our sovereign beings that allow us to manifest our own thoughts, manifest our egos for really, for that matter. And in that free will, there's this illusion that nothing is connected. I will say that the illusion that everyone is independent is just that. It's an illusion. While we're all sovereign beings with our own free will, we are all interconnected. And it's just like the difference between the uncertainty principle in quantum mechanics, where you cannot determine exactly what's going to happen, and therefore things are not as deterministic as we might think. In other words, we actually do have the ability to decide whether we're going to do this or we're going to do that, or we're going to do this, or we're going to yell out, ah, or whatever. We've got the free will to do all of that. And at the same time, all those choices, all those little thoughts are sent out, and everything else is also received. And that's like entanglement. That's like the consciousness that permeates everything, that interconnects everything throughout the entire universe, throughout all of time, instantly. And what I'm saying is that you get to make your own choices. You get to exercise your free will, but you don't get to be disconnected. You don't get to be disconnected.
Right. Even if you think you are.
Even if you think you are, even if you feel you are, you do not get to be disconnected. You are overflowing, you are abundant. What is in your glass may be determined by you, but the fullness of the glass is not determined by you.
That is a super powerful place, I feel like, for us to leave everybody. But I want to know if there's anything else that you haven't shared that you think is important before we wrap things up today.
The one thing that I would like to put out there, that I would like to create, manifest in the world, is the awareness of everyone's intrinsic worthiness. Our breath of life, our being, our human being, mm-hmm. is in itself worthiness. And all the interconnectedness and all the possibilities and all of what we can create individually and together is so much more abundant than we can ever imagine. And if we come even close to accepting that, scarcity will just not be an issue. We won't be reliving the Garden of Eden over and over and over and over again. Because the Garden of Eden is the scarcity of unworthiness, and more particularly scarcity, that experience of scarcity in the midst of abundance.
Yeah.
And for some reason, abundance isn't good enough.
That's crazy. Well, for our listeners today, if people would like to get in touch with you, how can they reach you?
So I'm on Facebook, David Chelf. You can also reach out to me via email at david@windomes.com. Windomes is WINDOMES.com. And it is inherently and intentionally metaphoric, in that is when and domes, and then wind and ohms.
Nice.
So we're speaking of wind, how much it can be your friend, how much it gets to be your friend, and how much you can win with it. So there you go.
That's great. And of course, it's going to be in the body of the email going out, so you don't have to remember that,
Sure.
But we always like to share at the end. Thank you so much, David, for being here. I feel like there's a whole expanse of information that makes so much more sense for myself. And hopefully everybody else is getting that same feeling. I really appreciated your share today. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Feel free to reach out to me, everybody, anytime. Believe me, we are all connected. We cannot get rid of that. And we can all embrace it and appreciate it. Love everyone, okay?
Yes.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye now.